What's up? It's Dr. Will James reporting to you at Dr. Will James Reports. If you don't mind, hit that like button, um, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. If you like what you hear in the video, please drop me a comment to help grow the channel, help out that algorithm. Today we are watching a video from Melyssa Ford. Um, and I'm just going to break it down. I watched this video. It's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of signs in the video as to why Melyssa Ford is 48 years old and single. So a lot of the things that I talk about, a lot of things that I tell you to look for, you're gonna see it in the video. But I'm just gonna highlight it as we go through the video. So I will be stopping the video to, narrate and go over certain things that we see in the video, certain red flags and just negative things that people should be on the lookout for. Because, like I said, this is a very important thing. And the funny thing is, if you watch this video, you'll see a ton of women in the comments, giving her praises for, what she's saying, but it's so negative, it's so detrimental that, it must be addressed. So let's get into it.
So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to pour myself a glass of wine. This is the good stuff. Now consider this episode a safe space. I really want to have a heart-to-heart about certain lifestyle choices that I've made. We've all seen the most recent political climate as it relates to the election, and it seems like women, we always seem to be the brunt of some kind of attack. And I don't really understand why. But when J.D. Vance said this,
saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
At first,
So there she goes. There's red flag number one. With her trying to be, or her being, a modern feminist, trying to make it seem like women are only under attack. If you go back, he didn't just name Kamala Harris, he named Pete Buttigieg. So I don't know why she's trying to make it seem like he's naming people who don't have children. Now, she's trying to make it seem like, oh, women are always under attack. No, it's not women are under attack. It's men and women. Pete Buttigieg is a white male, 42 years old with no kids. But that's just red flag number one. Let's listen to what she says. Now that we know we clearly heard what he said. I'll play it again.
See, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too? And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
at first I was offended. And then when I thought about it, I really just had to laugh because never been married, childless cat ladies. Honestly, that sounds like a dream come true to me. I don't know. Like solitude, my own choices, and animals that love me. Oh my God,
So she's trying to act like being 48 years old, childless, and never married is a good thing. So she's trying to promote to the next generation that, oh, being single, childless and 48 with no kids is a good thing. Being able to make my own decisions, solitude, as if you can't be married and make your own decisions. You can't, well, obviously, there's a certain amount of respect within a marriage with certain decisions. Your partner, your husband or wife should be in on it. But solitude, she's acting like you can't have that within a marriage. Just because you had a whole bunch of toxic relationships, and we're going to get into it, it's because she's the toxic person, she's the common denominator, and you're going to hear what she has to say starting out with the first relationship. You're the problem. But this is what she's trying to promote to the next generation. She's not as happy as she's trying to make it seem, but we'll continue.
Call the cops. This sounds awful. But anyways, I know that I'm not the only one that felt that their life choices were put under attack. So this episode is called I Am 48, I Am Child Free, and I've never been married. And guess what? That's okay.
As she sips her wine. So when I think about this, and I try to have an open mind, and you try to look at it from different perspectives and things like that. And the first reaction might be to say, sure, that is okay. That you're 48, never been married and childless. And that's okay. But when you think about it on a larger scale, and what best serves the Black community, and then as we watch the rest of this video, it's not okay, because her behavior and the things that she's going to describe is just not okay. How she got to this point of being 48, childless and single is not okay. And we need more Black nuclear families. So the things that she's going to promote throughout the next 45 minutes is not okay.
I never made it down the aisle, but I have been engaged in the past. How many engagements? I would say 2.5. Let's start with the 0.5, since that was the first one. I was involved with a man who loved me. He was good looking, he was tall, he was charismatic, gregarious. Everybody loved him. My mom loved him, my sister loved him, my niece loved him, my friends loved him. Everybody loved him. But there was something inside of me that just said, this is not perfect.
So she had a man who loved her, is what she said. He was tall, he was handsome, he loved her, everybody loved him. All of her family, her mother, everyone loved him. Friends, everyone loved him, is what she said. Something inside of her, just something inside of her, said it's not perfect. That makes no sense. But let's hear more.
The furthest thing from perfect. He would say things like, nobody's ever going to love you the way that I love you.
So she's about to make it seem like a bad thing that he would say, no one's ever going to love you like I love you. Now, what did his action say? As she goes on to speak, his action says, I love you to the moon and beyond. I'll give you the world. So that's just figurative language for saying like, yo, I love you with all my heart and soul. That's him saying like, I love you, more than life itself. I love you more than anyone could love another human being. No one's going to love you as much as I love you. This man was head over heels in love with her. And him saying that one statement is her issue, because for this guy, she's not going to say anything else other than that. Watch.
And I believed him. I wrestled with this internal sense of guilt. I wrestled with the guilt of honestly wanting to be free, honestly wanting to live my life and to date and to experience other men.
So she wanted to experience other men. So she was for the streets. That's what she's wrestling with. So while you bring it up, there's no accountability on her end. She's trying to make this good guy seem guilty to remove guilt from her. You were for the streets. You could have been honest and just told him that you wanted to experience other men and do all of this stuff. And see, a lot of women do that. They act like they want a relationship and they really don't. But they're trying to maintain a certain image of this good girl, and they know they shouldn't be a 304 and they know they shouldn't be sleeping around. So they try to put the image on of having a boyfriend, but meanwhile they do other things and they sleep around.
Experience other things and other places. I just wanted to live my life. I had moved to New York from Toronto, a totally different country, with $25, 2 suitcases, and a one-way ticket. I didn't have permission from my country to leave. I didn't have permission from this country to be here. And I was making things happen for myself at a very, very rapid pace. And so to find myself inside of a relationship that felt so stifling at this very young age, and not having the vocabulary to speak up for myself and articulate that somebody who loves you would not say those things to you. They wouldn't say that nobody will ever love you the way that I love you, because that indicates that there's a part of me that's broken, or there's a part of me that's unlovable. But I didn't know how to articulate this. So I stayed in this relationship that I was wildly unhappy in for approximately 3.5 years.
So she stayed in a relationship for 3.5 years while being wildly unhappy. And the main reason she's unhappy is just because she wants to be single and she wants to go out and experience other men and be free, as she calls it, not really because of anything that this gentleman that she was with, not because of anything he was doing. He loved her, is what, basically what she's going to admit to. She's not going to say anything bad about him, but somehow you were unhappy in this relationship for 3.5 years. So for 3.5 years, you wasted this young man's time instead of just being honest and saying you didn't want to be in a relationship. You want to go out there and do what you want to do.
Close to four. And I have to admit, not faithful in this relationship. Nothing that I'm proud of, but I just chalk that up to I was really, really young and I was hood.
So she just admitted that she was not faithful in that relationship. She didn't say she caught him being unfaithful, but she admitted that she was unfaithful in a relationship, and she blames it on her being young. Mind you, she's over 20 years of age. So, like, how young are we saying young to where you don't know better? You're in a relationship. You're a young, pretty lady. You have options. Nothing is making you be in a relationship tied down to this man if you want to go roam the streets and sleep with other men.
Famous. I was on the covers of magazines, on your local newsstand. So recognized me. And that was another source of pressure. Felt being inside of this really free to explore all of my options. And so one day I was going through.
Explore all of her options means sleep around. And he wasn't holding you hostage. You could have did that. If that's in you, see, this is what men have to understand. This is why they say you can't turn a hoe to a housewife. If it's inside her, if it's ingrained in her, she's always going to want that. She has to really seek the Most High to get that spirit off her, to get that Jezebel, to get that whole spirit out of her. Like, it's extremely hard. If they still have it there, if you can see the signs, like with the signs I always highlight, and the stuff that's gonna come out of her mouth, just stay away from it, because you ain't gonna change that person.
Some drawers, folding laundry, placing clothes, in the drawers and such, and I found it. I found a box, and when I saw it, I said, "Please, God, don't let this be what I think it is." And I opened the box, and there it was. It was a ring, and the only thing that I could think was that it was an engagement ring. It sure as hell was not a promise ring. We were way beyond that. We were not in high school. I was not wearing this boy's varsity jacket. This was an engagement ring. And if I knew this man the way that I knew him, that proposal was going to be very public. And that terrified me. I didn't want to have to say no in front of our friends and family and publicly humiliate him. He did not deserve that. But I also could not see myself saying yes in front of everybody just to save face, and then later on have to break it to him like that this is not something that I was going to be able to go forward with. So what I did instead was I packed up all my belongings while he was out of town and put them in storage and flew back to Canada. And then I had the conversation about us breaking up over the phone. I know what you're probably thinking as well. Yo, Melyssa, that's fucked up. I know. It took years for me to make peace with this decision. I have self-flagellated over this decision. I have beaten myself up every way to Sunday that you possibly can. I tried to reconcile with him at one point, which was a big mistake.
As she sips her wine.
That is.
So let's unpack this. She had a good guy. She had a husband. She had husband material. A guy she was dating who for 3.5 years, he was good to her. So good to her that everyone around them, her family and her friends, his family, his friends, everyone loved him. He was a good guy. He wanted to propose to her. She found the ring. Instead of having that conversation with that man in person, she gets on a plane and leaves and breaks up with him via phone conversation. And she said she did this because she didn't want to have to deny him and say no to him when he proposed, because she knows that he loves her so much it was going to be public, very public. And his friends and his family and her friends and her family would probably be there. And she didn't want to have to say no to him because he didn't deserve it, because he's a good guy. But what does she do to that good guy? She rips his heart out. She doesn't even give him the honor and respect, the dignity to have a conversation with him in person. She just leaves while he's out of town, gets on a plane, calls him like, yeah, we're not going to work. And then saying she tried to reconcile with him one time, but that was a mistake. How was it a mistake? See, because he was too good of a guy. And a lot of the times, these women love to chase the man that's, might be good, but a little edgy, or just flat out bad for them. And then they end up like her, 48 years old and single, looking like this.
The 0.5.
I had an ugly duckling phase. Don't tell anybody. I destroyed all the pictures, so there's no proof. Before I became a video model and a model, and I was like known as the brain amongst all my friends. So I was studying forensic psychology with a minor in English literature in university. So the fact that I started to become known more for my looks than my brain is kind of ironic. The attention just snowballed, and I started to see that I was able to, make a business out of it. If it didn't make money, it didn't make sense.
Society places an enormous amount of pressure on us to check certain boxes. The box of go to school and excel. You've got to pursue a career based on what you went to school for. And you've got to excel and become successful. And you have to have your 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, 15-year, 20-year plan, all while you're in your 20s. Get married, get the white picket fence, and have 2.3 kids. Never figured out the point situation when it came to the statistics, because what's a third of a kid? But I digress on that. The problem with the boxes is that we never check in with ourselves. It is never, ever, ever our first thought as to, well, what is it that I actually want? I am now, welcoming into my circle a lot of women who checked all those boxes. And for all intents and purposes, a lot of the stuff really actually did not work out. Yes, they ended up with the children, but they ended up in sometimes a loveless, sometimes an abusive, and sometimes a marriage of convenience.
Sometimes.
Sometimes they didn't even get the marriage, they just got the kids, and they inherited a whole lot of struggle and strife. And it's not to say that their choices are better or worse than the choices that I made. These are just choices.
Yeah, right.
But for us women, I feel like our choices oftentimes have never really, really belonged to us. And when we have tried to exert our sense of independence, we are shamed for it. At this point, let me go on to the second engagement. So,
When are you shamed for displaying independence? She's just talking. You got to stay away from these modern feminists. They make no sense.
I'm 28 years old
28.
and I have left the previous relationship, the 0.5.
Mm-hmm.
And I have met this man who.
So quickly here, she says she had came to New York when she was like 20. She was in a relationship for 3.5 years. So she, depending on when this relationship started, she's at least 23 and a half when it ended. And she's claiming she's young. It just shows how evil a person is to break up with someone like that. But whatever.
The minute I saw him, I knew I was going to be with him. He just was it. I don't know how to describe it. And the second I heard his voice, I said, I'm going to marry this man. I don't know what it was. Like, he had this Louisiana drawl. It's my favorite Southern accent. He was huge, like 6'1", 246 pounds of hulking muscle. He had skin the color of like red clay. He had this thick neck, big round head. He had this crooked tooth that drove me wild. His flaws were like manna from heaven for me. And I loved his dirty draws, and I could just sleep in his armpit right after he'd played a game of like pickup basketball. That is how much I loved this man. And our courtship was a whirlwind.
So, did you want marriage or not? Because you're 48 and single, never been married. Sounding here like you wanted it.
He wined and dined me. He bought me lovely, lovely gifts. I'd wake up to those baby blue Tiffany boxes just laid on the pillow right next to me. We could go to my favorite store and his for him, I could get. I say that the gifts really mattered nothing to me. It was this man. He was the gift to me. That's just a fact. And we were 6 months into our relationship when the first sign of trouble appeared. I was in Denver for All-Star Weekend, and I was working for BET at the time. So I had a lot of responsibilities. I had to make a lot of appearances. I had to interview a lot of people. And a lot of those people were athletes. And he was back home.
So keep in mind, this is something that's important. This is a man who, by her standards, is, extremely handsome, according to her, letting her tell it. And he's well off financially based off what she's saying about him buying her everything and taking her to her favorite stores and just randomly getting her gifts and all of this other stuff from, her favorite jewelry spots. And instead of relaxing into the relationship, now I'm gonna let her slide a little bit because 6 months is still kind of early. But a man who is doing that well off financially and he's taking care of you and he's into you and only you, a lot of the times they want to see you in your femininity. They want to see you relax and say, all right, babe, you got it. I'm going to let you get it. So just a message for all of the other women out there. Now, again, I'm going to let her slide here a bit because 6 months is early. You can't just cut your career. Anything could happen. The relationship could end. But just know that. Just know that they don't want to see you running out doing all of these other things and trying to have money when they're clearly well off and they're going to take care of you. Relax and let the man take care of you.
And I did not know that he was jealous. It didn't even cross my mind. And so when I got home after an event and I was perturbed by, an interaction with a strange man at a party that I had been at. He'd said something vile to me and it hurt my feelings. And all I wanted was to be comforted. And so I went back to my hotel room and I called my boyfriend and I just asked him to just tell me that he thought that I was beautiful and that he loved me. And he didn't do that. He just pressured me to tell him what happened. Why are you asking me to do this? And so I told him what happened, and he responded by saying, why would I want to date such a weak bitch that would be that offended by what some strange guy has to say to her?
Now, I don't know if that's true. That seems like a lot for 6 months of bliss. And then out of nowhere, the first time he reacts with a red flag or overreacts to a situation, he calls you a weak B. And he's never said that before in 6 months. I don't know if I believe that. If that's true, that would be wrong. He's right in saying, like, you shouldn't be caring about, what this strange man had to say. If I'm your, if I'm your hubby, if I'm your man, that's some stranger we never gonna see again. You shouldn't be worried about that. You beautiful. I love you. That's all that matters. And at the same token, she should be knowing that. Cause like for a man, same thing for a man. You shouldn't be caring what no other woman out there in the street got to say. If your woman think you good, if the only thing that matters is your woman, your wife, your lady, what she has to say. Some stranger, some strange female out there that don't matter. But if he said it in that way, that would be wrong. That would be crazy.
There's just no way that he just said that to me. I'm sorry, what? And he said, you heard me. And I said, I'm really confused right now. And he was like, I'm sure you are. I felt like I was talking to a stranger. There's no way that this was the person that I had just spent the last 6 months with, completely absorbed with, and in the throes of like love and ecstasy with. And I said, I'm glad that I'm finding out who you really actually are now rather than later. He said, yeah, I'm sure you are. Click. And hung up the phone on me. I cried myself to sleep that night. And the next day I had to cover a ladies' luncheon, the wives of the NBA. And so I had to be perfect and pretty. And I had to act like the man of my dreams had not just told me to basically go F myself. And so while I was getting ready, a large bouquet of flowers was delivered. My makeup artist said, Mel, you should read the card. And it said, you're beautiful to me and I love you. And I'm sorry. And then his name. I burst into tears. It just flew out of my face. So basically my whole beat face just melted. And I called him and I said, I received your flowers. And he said, I am so sorry. And I told him, I'm going to forgive you because I love you. But you can't ever speak to me like that ever again. He's like, I promise I won't. So whenever people wonder, how do people end up in abusive relationships and why do you stay? The reasons are aplenty, but I will start by saying that that is not the way that it begins. It begins with love bombing. It begins with flowers, candy, gifts, and the wonderful sex and the cuddles and the pillow talk. And this is how it
So it starts off
begins.
normal.
And it can last for a lengthy amount of time before that person really shows up. The true version of themselves shows up. And by that point, you start to bargain with yourself and they start to apologize. And their apologies are usually very, very sincere because at the end of the day, I truly believe that they believe their apologies are real. They just have an illness inside of them. And I would also venture to say that the first signs of abuse are usually not physical. And by the time it gets to physicality, you start to reason that you were an active participant in it. You start
So
to
I wonder if
reason.
she was cheating on this guy too, like she was cheating on the last one. And while she's mentioning abuse, I think what she did to her last partner was abusive. I think she was emotionally abusive to her last partner. I think he was a good guy, and I think she took advantage of him. And a lot of the stuff that she's saying could be counted as abuse. For you to just up and leave while he's out of town and then call him and say, you know what, it's not going to work after 3.5 years. And being with him for 3.5 years, saying that you didn't want to be in that situation, you didn't want to be in that relationship, you felt trapped, and you know that he loved you so much. She was emotionally abusive to that guy. You better believe it.
With yourself that you started the fight by angering him or saying something that was out of pocket. Or you reason with yourself that you are no shrinking violet. So it's not like you got hit and cowered in a corner. You fought back. These are the things that you reason and bargain with yourself that allow you to stay in this level of toxic relationship. And so, as much as I would love to say that that was the last time that he spoke to me in that way, and that was the last time that I received it, that would not be the truth. We were together for another 1.5 years, and I accepted his marriage proposal. And a lot of you would probably be asking, why would you do that? Why would you accept the marriage proposal of this man that was so abusive towards you and unfaithful towards you and really bad at it? Like, I found out everything, all.
So let me get this straight. The man who treated her perfectly good to her for 3.5 years, who loved her, who loved everything about her, who she found the wedding ring while he was planning to propose. She left him, just up and left him. Couldn't give him any respect or anything. She doesn't tell us about him disrespecting her in any way, treating her wrong in any way. She said he was a good guy. He didn't deserve a no in front of everybody. But the guy who called her the B word for no good reason, according to her story, was physically abusive and cheating on her. She stayed with him for another 1.5 years and then accepted his wedding proposal. This you can't make this stuff up. This makes no sense.
the time. And I don't really have an excuse for it other than
Stupid.
I
304.
was addicted to him. Was working at BET at the time when we were dating. And more than once, observations were made about bruises on my body and how skinny I was getting, obviously from the stress. And people had voiced concern for me, but I just shooed them away. We tussle. It's fine. No problem. But
I don't know if I believe
there
it.
really was a reason for concern.
What's his name?
I stayed through it all and accepted the marriage proposal. The final straw for me was his reaction to finding out that my mom was ill. I had gotten a phone call while I was out with him and his family, and he was acting up as per usual. And I got a phone call from my aunt telling me that my mom had been rushed to the hospital. I was in Texas. So in order for me to rush home to see my mom, I would have to leave Texas, go home to New York, pick up my passport, and then go to Canada. And when I told him what was going on, obviously I was looking for empathy and sympathy and compassion, and that was not what I got. It was on this day that I finally could see the forest for the trees. If I stayed in this relationship, in 10 years, I would have that white picket fence, and I would have the 2 kids, and I would be an abused woman, hiding her bruises and her broken bones and her scars from her family and her friends and society at large, because I was a forward-facing media personality / model. My mom's sickness was...
So let me get this straight. This man was abusing you, physically beating on you, leaving you bruised and battered, cheating on you, and you knew about it. You caught everything because he was just doing it so disrespectfully. And you drew the line at his response, his reaction to your mom being sick and him not giving enough empathy or sympathy to that situation. That's what woke you up to say, oh, I got to leave. Notice how she's using this one as the example for being married and having the picket fence and having the children and all of that stuff. What about with the guy before that? The one that you left, you up and just got on a plane and you just left. If you stayed with him in 10 years, you would have had the picket fence and you would have had the marriage and you would have had the children. What would you have had to hide from your friends and family then and society then? Oh no, but he wasn't good enough, huh? You can't make this stuff up. She had her husband. She was with this guy for 3.5 years. He was good enough for her to be with and lay with for 3.5 years, even though she was cheating on him. Now the guy's cheating on her, which we don't know if she's cheating on this guy either, since it's in her to cheat. We already know that. Now, this guy is so bad, but she drew the line finally at her mom's sickness and his reaction. You had your husband. You could have had the marriage and the picket fence and all of that, but you wanted to be for the streets.
Was, strangely enough, a blessing in disguise. Mm-hmm. And that relationship came to an end. And that was the first full engagement. So 1.5. So that's where we are right now.
Any advice for any beautiful women out there that are trying to make it? Any advice you have to give? Because I know it's a hard struggle.
Understand that there's no shortcuts and there's a lot of sacrifices involved in this game that nobody will ever tell you. You're asking for a lot when you want to become, as visible as, some people on this carpet or for that. Yeah, exactly. The right way. It's just be careful. Be careful what you wish for.
When I was 20 years old, I had this boyfriend.
She was 20.
His name was Tony Smith. I can say his name because you could throw a rock and hit a Tony Smith. It may as well be like John Doe. He was from Greensboro, North Carolina. And He had come up to Toronto to play for the Toronto Argos, which is a football team in the Canadian Football League. And he had played in the National Football League, the NFL, for many years. And a lot of NFL players, when they're not ready to hang up their cleats, and not ready to kind of be put out to pasture, they'll come to the CFL. And so I met Tony at this festival called Caravana in Toronto. He was so beautiful. My God, instant attraction, obviously. And we started dating.
On this confident or for that, yeah, exactly. The right way. It's just be careful. Like, be careful what you wish for.
When I was 20 years old, I had this boyfriend. His name was Tony Smith. I can say his name because, you could throw a rock and hit a Tony Smith. It may as well be like John Doe. He was from Greensboro, North Carolina. And he had come up to Toronto to play for the Toronto Argos, which is a football team in the Canadian Football League. And he had played in the National Football League, the NFL, for many years. And a lot of NFL players, when they're not ready to hang up their cleats, and not ready to kind of be put out to pasture, they'll come to the CFL.
So she just said that she could say his name and not the other boyfriends because his name is Tony Smith. And that's like a John Doe. There's so many Tony Smiths. But she goes on to tell us that he played in the NFL and he played in the CFL, Canadian Football League, for the Toronto Argonauts. So now we could easily look him up. Google is free, and she's acting like it isn't. She says he's from Greensboro, North Carolina, but according to his Wikipedia, he was born in Chicago, Illinois, and he went to high school at Warren Central in Vicksburg, Mississippi. So I don't know if she had her facts messed up where he said he was from the South and she just thought it was Greensboro, North Carolina, but Tony Darrell Smith is the only player she could be talking about. There's no way there's two Tony Smiths that were in the NFL and went to Toronto to play for the Toronto Argonauts in the Canadian Football League around the time where she would have been 20. This guy was born in 1970 and he's 54 now. She's 48. So she was born around 1976. She was 20 in 1996. This guy was drafted in 1992. He probably had an average NFL career of 4 years. This says he was in Toronto around 1998. 97, 98. She had to be slightly older. It's not adding up to 20, but that's him. Anyway, we can continue.
And so I met Tony at this festival called Caravana in Toronto. He was so beautiful. My God, instant attraction, obviously. And we started dating. We genuinely liked each other. We liked each other to the point where we could say really, really offhand things to each other. For example, he asked me what my fantasy was. And I got this look on my face. And I said, well, a fantasy would be, I guess, a menage with me and you and somebody else. And he was like, another woman? I said, no, with another guy. And he was like, really? He was like,
so listen to what she just said out her mouth. Guys, pay attention to this. Real 304 activity going on here. And the crazy thing is a lot of women have that as a fantasy. There are some good women out here who would never want to be, just ragdolled like that and taken advantage of like that. But if she has a fantasy like that, just know she's for the streets. Because chances are she lived it out. Or she will live it out. Because she can. And she's calling that a menage. No, that's a train. If it's you and two or more men, that's a train being run on you, girl. It's not the same.
Like, do you have an idea as to who this guy is? I said, yeah. He's like, really? You have to tell me. I said, it's your best friend. And I expected him to maybe slap me. I don't know what. But he threw his head back and roared with laughter. And I was like, wow, that was not the response I was expecting. And he said, do you want me to make that happen? I was like, oh my God, that is so sweet. No, absolutely not. It is just a fantasy. It is meant to stay there. But just the fact that you are open to it and don't make me feel shame for feeling this way. He was like, why would I make you feel that way?
Any man that you are dating, you're in a relationship with, like she says, man, Tony Durrell Smith, professional football player. Any man that you tell that you want to have a threesome with him and his best friend, and he says, oh, he laughs and says, oh, yo, what, you want me to make that happen? Understand your position in his life. He doesn't view you as wifey material. At that very moment, even if he did prior to that view you as wifey material, once you revealed to him that you were a 304 by saying that, he put you in the whole category. So now he's like, sure, I'll let my buddy come. You know, we'll have a good time with you. We'll have fun with you. We'll do whatever we want to do with you. And we'll laugh about it. And we'll talk about it later. Like, yeah, we had that chick, Melyssa Ford, little bad chick, and we was doing whatever. We had, we trained her. That's what you would become. You think he's just like, oh, such a good guy that he's like, oh, whatever fantasy you have, I'll let you live it out. Now, there are some cucks out here, but that's rare. Most men, especially most men of a certain status, they ain't trying to share their woman. So what are you talking about?
And Tony, I don't know. He maybe he was just an anomaly, but
Yeah.
wherever we would go, no matter how scantily I was dressed, he would let me move around the party as I felt
Yeah.
the need to and interact with anybody. And he would just sit
'Cause you
there
weren't
and just
wifey.
watch me with a smile. And at one point, somebody stood next to him and asked him, like, aren't you afraid to let her walk around like that? And he was like, absolutely not. She's going home with me.
How do you know someone stood next to him and asked him that? Were you there when they asked? How would you know that? Why are you speaking from his point of view? I don't know if I believe her. This doesn't sound right. I think she's just trying to feed her narrative. Because even if he told you that, how would you know it's true? It doesn't make sense. She's a liar.
I don't have anything to be worried about. And you want to know something? He was absolutely right. His level of confidence and knowing that I had eyes for nobody but him was what made him so much more sexy to me.
And you had eyes for his best friend. And he knew that because you told him. So what are you talking about? You make no sense.
So much more attractive and made me like and love him so much more. I wish that I could say that the vast majority of my relationships went like this, but they didn't. They didn't.
So she's trying to highlight him as a great experience for her with a great relationship. For one, what happened to that relationship? That was when you were 20, according to you, before you came to the United States. Why didn't you stay with him? What happened there? Secondly, you're trying to highlight him because you want guys to be simps and let their women do whatever they want to do. No man is, let me not say no man, most men who are viewing a woman for as a potential wife, they don't want her walking around wearing anything, showing off her body. They want her to dress modestly. They don't want her to just walk out just showing all the goodies, showing all the cleavage and everything. It's not about you coming home with me. It's about respect. You represent me when you walk outside, just like I represent you. And you have to represent me in the right light. Carry yourself in a certain way. Carry yourself like you have respect and dignity for yourself, like you have respect for me. That's what it's about. I know you coming home with me, but you still need to respect yourself and respect me. Don't go out there showing all the goodies to everybody. And she's trying to highlight that, like, oh, men should act like that. Oh, he just watched me in the party and he let me walk around no matter how naked I was or whatever I was showing. He didn't care because he knew I was coming home with him. And he knew I only had eyes for him, even though I told him I had eyes on his best friend. Makes no sense.
I'm going to take a sip of wine.
Sips her wine. Mm-hmm.
I was raised as an only child. My father was a Rolling Stone, and I am the youngest of 11. But I am my mother's only child, and I was raised in a 2-parent household, just me on my own. I used to wish constantly for a brother and a sister or a twin. It was around 6 when I figured out the twin thing was not going to happen. But I really wanted a brother or a sister because I was lonely. And I was smack in the middle of a very tumultuous marriage. Some of my earliest memories as a child are of my parents arguing and physically fighting each other. At one point, I was 5 and I got in the middle of my parents physically fighting each other. My mom was holding a glass pitcher above her head and was prepared to smash it on my dad's head. And I want to say that this was in defense of herself. This was her protecting herself. So, needless to say, my first introduction to marriage and how men and women, the expectation of how they interact with each other on a romantic level was very, 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 very traumatizing. And they didn't do anything to try to correct it. They didn't sit me down and explain things to me or apologize to me. I think that that's something that parents really miss the mark on a lot of the time, is that you are not perfect. You are human. And to be a human being is to err. And sometimes you do things to unintentionally harm your children or traumatize them, and they deserve an explanation and they deserve an apology. When my parents were not arguing with each other, they were staying as far away from each other as possible. And what that meant was I was left home alone a lot. So one of the main reasons why my parents never said no to me when I wanted another animal. I had nothing but cats and dogs and birds and fish all over the house.
And
I
that's
feel
what
like
you in life
animals
with.
saved me. It sounds strange. Like I'm like, Mowgli or something from the, what was that? What's that book called? The Jungle Book? Yeah, I'm Mowgli from the Jungle Book. But yeah, that was my reality. My parents would come home late at night. The animals were the ones that took care of me. Thankfully, I didn't burn down the house. But this left an imprint on my brain as to the way that men and women interact with each other. And it left me with a very serious internalized distrust of men. I think that
So the more they talk, it always comes out. So I'm glad she's just talking and let it all come out. She's scarred. She has a distrust for men, which is why she will treat men poorly, like the first guy she mentioned. and probably tons of others. There's no reason why a woman who is physically beautiful as she is would not have a man other than just her being treacherous and, treating the majority of them poorly. She's never wanted, she wanted to think about it. She says she grew up seeing this toxic relationship with physical abuse, a toxic marriage, and she said yes to somebody who was physically abusing her, according to her own story. Why would you fall for that? Why would you say yes to that if that's what you grew up despising? If that's what made you lose trust in men? It doesn't make sense. She is damaged. That's why she is where she deserves to be, by herself. And just please stay by yourself. I hope don't nobody fall for it.
This is where I developed the disconnect of wanting to create progeny. I just did not feel that urge like other women have to have children. And it is definitely intertwined with what I witnessed from a very early age as to my parents and their dysfunction. I ended up getting an IUD implanted in my uterus. And when I say that sucker was Fort Knox, nothing was getting through that mofo. And it stayed in so long that it ultimately made the decision for me. But yet again, it's not like I felt any source of pressure. Last engagement, at approximately 36, 37 years old. And I'll be honest, I thought that I was in love with this man, but I wasn't. What I was traumatized.
So the last relationship started when she was 28. She was with him for 6 months when she first realized he was cuckoo, according to her. And then she stayed with him for another year and a half. So that was about 2 years. So she was 30, around 30, 31 when that one ended. Now she's 36. Okay.
From an experience that had happened to me on a cruise ship where I was almost raped. And I could not be in the room alone with my own shadow. I was so traumatized by what had happened to me that when this man appeared, he was offering safety and security. He was physically huge, but he also came with a very secure lifestyle and a lot of security. And so I felt safe. And that's the only thing I was looking for. I was looking for safety. And so I lied to myself.
You lied to him.
And it was very easy to do that, to just dive in head first, forget the rocks below. And during the process of this relationship, I started to realize that I was losing myself completely and totally. Friends had started to notice, Mel, you're paying a lot of attention to his career, but what are you doing about yours? And
what career did you have at 36, 37? You were a video vixen. Your prime years were from 20 to 35. Now you're 36, 37. Like, what has she done since she's 48 now. What has she done in the last 10, 11 years? Well, what are you talking about your career? If he's well off, he came in, he swept you off your feet. He's financially stable. He's willing to take care of you. What are you talking about? You're paying a lot of attention to your career. Don't try to make it seem like he's doing it. You just passing up good men. You're the problem.
And I didn't want to hear it. I actually did not want to even hear my own name. I didn't know what it meant to be Melyssa Ford anymore. I had no clue. The sound of my own name gave me goosebumps, and not in the best way. I was having a massive identity crisis. And so when he proposed, he didn't even get the full words out before I said yes, because I was running from myself. I was running from my truth. I was running from the healing journey that was on the horizon. I was running, and I was trying to put the blinders on. But there was always that like internal sense of that steel core of resilience and tenacity inside of me that said, Melyssa, this is not your truth. This is not your path. This is not it. And as scary as it was to keep trying to align myself with my internal compass, obviously, you know, you make all these decisions, but it's got to bring you back pointing due north, which leads me to where I am now, 48, child-free, and never been married. And honestly, with zero regrets.
Yeah,
Did you ever decide to freeze your eggs?
Yeah, the freezing eggs conversation.
So it led you to where you are now because you played in that man's face, just like you played in the first guy's face. The second guy, you make it seem like, all right, he was all these types of crazy. You didn't say his name, but you said Tony Darrell Smith's name. I want to know who these men are. I would love to hear their story. I hope they come out. That's probably why you're avoiding saying their name, because no one can sue you for defamation or anything like that if you don't say their name, because you don't have proof of this. Was a police report filed? I want to get the information. When you clearly admit to us and you tell us that you just upped and left a dude, and you know, while he was out of town, I don't know what to think of this, you know, really. You know, she is toxic. Her message is toxic. I can't believe the comments. The story she shared 4 stories. There was the 2.5 marriage proposals. The 2 she said yes to. The one that she left before when she found the wedding ring. And then there was the dude, Tony Darrell Smith, who she was dating when she was 20, who she tried to highlight as being such a good guy. But what happened with that one too? But he was so good because he was willing to let her have a threesome with her and another guy who was his best friend. Didn't shame her about that. And he just let her wear whatever she wanted to wear, and didn't care. But understand, he wasn't viewing you as wifey material. And any guy who has that reaction to you, you know, just going out wearing whatever you want, especially in Black culture, 9 times out of 10, he's not viewing you as a wife any longer. If he was, that's out the door. Especially if one who's just going to slap fives and laugh when you tell him that you want to have a sexual encounter with him and another guy. He's either not heterosexual or he's a cuck, which I also don't consider to be heterosexual, because that's just ridiculous. That's, like I said, ridiculous. But the type of stuff that she has going on in this video shouldn't be cheered on. It shouldn't be looked at as healthy. She had unhealthy relationships. She's unhealthy. Her messaging is unhealthy. She's tarnished. And she's dysfunctional, just like the household she grew up in. Y'all can let me know what y'all think in the comments. Let's talk about this. Share the video. Subscribe if you haven't. Peace.